Hey everyone, Brandon Laws here. Welcome back to Transform Your Workplace. Today I'm sitting down with Jennifer Moss, the best-selling author of The Burnout Epidemic and now the brand new book, Why Are We Here? Creating a Work Culture Everyone Wants. If you've ever asked, is this job really worth it? Or struggled to spark hope and belonging on your team, Jennifer's insights will flip the script on how you lead, covering everything from toxic productivity and AI anxiety to making flexibility a basic right, not a perk. This episode is brought to you by Xenium HR, your partner for complete HR, payroll, and benefits solutions, all under one roof. If you want more time to focus on people and culture, go check out xeniumhr.com. If you enjoyed today's conversation, do me a favor, hit that follow or subscribe button, leave a quick rating, and share the episode with a colleague who cares about building a workplace everyone wants. All right, grab your notebook or open that notes app. Let's jump in with Jennifer Moss. Here's a conversation. Jennifer, it is such a pleasure to have you on Transform Your Workplace. Thanks for coming back on the show.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back, Brandon. It's going to be a great conversation. I already know.
It is. You're out with a brand new book. It's called Why Are We Here? Creating a Work Culture Everyone Wants. And you open the book describing this moment like a collective existential crisis where we're all sort of asking ourselves at the same time, why am I here? What was the spark behind that made you realize that question deserved an entire book? And how do you see that reshaping our relationship with our work?
This has been sort of a project of discovery for me with my other books. I had this very specific plan, even though I still am a discovery writer, which is much to my editor's frustration, I'm sure at times, because I'm like, I don't have a plan always. But this one was really, meandering. And I think it's because I was going with this gut feeling that I had. And it was, before the Great Resignation, I've been speaking a lot on burnout and sort of traveling a lot with that book, The Burnout Epidemic. And I kept hearing this refrain from people that I met. And I met so many Uber drivers. I ended up interviewing over 100 Uber drivers for this book.
Incredible.
Which is wild. Yeah. And I started asking, like, is it okay if I record this? Or is this okay if I jot down notes? What I kept hearing was this story of people leaving their jobs in a very kind of dramatic way. Like this one woman, Kara, which, who I mentioned in the book, on track to be the first female Black partner, lost 3 members of her family in the pandemic, quit her job entirely, like left that whole track, ended up being an Uber driver so that she could focus on this nonprofit she had been working on the side. And that was not just this one person. It became story after story. Someone had left Wall Street. I had CEOs leave their entire jobs and not join the board. 23 years, their only goal was to be the CEO. In a year in the pandemic, out entirely. They weren't driving an Uber. They had just got an Airbnb in Florida and a one-way ticket. And so like all of these stories made me want to understand what that was, because so many people kept saying life is short, like for their decision. And that research around mortality salience and facing our mortality, not just for a few people in the world, but collectively and globally, people had gone through a facing of the finitude of their lives. And it started this cascade effect of people quitting their job, taking time off, women moving into more part-time roles, just a lot of people saying, I want to leave a legacy. I want to have meaning. I want to have purpose. And what I'm doing right now feels like a grind and I hate it. And if life is short, I better fix it. I better do something about it. And that's really where the book kind of germinated and started to form.
I'm curious, like, if some of the discovery in this question we're all asking ourselves, like, why am I here? Did it start with you in some ways? Like, were you feeling that a little bit, or were you just seeing it or in your inner circles, and then that led you to like talking to these Uber drivers, and hopefully were you in the back seat of the Uber driver and you just happened to ask these, like, what's your story? Like, how does that even come up?
I'm, super curious as a journalist, and I always, get chatting, what made you decide to drive an Uber? So, and it just kept coming up and up. But yes, I think, Brandon, you probably know this from all my books. I feel like I'm trying to self-soothe
Yeah.
or come up for questions for my own feelings that I'm having. The burnout epidemic stemmed from myself going through burnout as a female founder of a tech startup, which burns a lot of people out, even entrepreneurialism, but a female tech founder is really difficult. And this book was the same thing. I was realizing like what is important. And I really started to land on this concept of toxic productivity, which is an article that I just put out for HBR, Let's End Toxic Productivity. And I think the reason why I went viral is because people get that throughout the pandemic, we developed this habit of always having to be productive. It started with like baking bread and Marie Kondoing your kitchen and learning a new language because if we had, all the time we had in the pandemic. Like, so then now we had to manage 3 kids at home. I'm writing a book, on burnout from my bedroom. My husband's at home, like, all of these things. Then we felt pressure to do more.
Yeah.
And that escalating need for us to be productive has permeated our entire lives. And there's a habit there that I think employers are taking advantage of. And we are also not setting boundaries. And I recognize like I was in my pajamas constantly with a glass of wine, finishing up admin stuff at 11 o'clock at night. There were 0 boundaries. And I think we were all feeling that. And so that's also like, why are all these people changing jobs and what's going on? Do they feel like me? Like this is just overwhelming and it's gone on too long? And I discovered that, yes, there were a lot of people that felt like me.
The answer is yes. I mean, it's very relatable. And what I love about it, you set the stage in the book of like, here's the reality where most people are at. And I'm sure there's many people who are super happy in their jobs and feel respected and all of those things. But then the bulk of your book really covers like, how do we make sure that we build cultures where people feel respected, motivated, productive, and not feeling burned out and all these negative feelings that we're feeling and constantly asking like, what am I doing with my life right now? I know we could be happy, and you outline a lot of different ways. So I want to get into some of those things that could help us bring us out of the misery. You start with hope, and you talk about how hope is this major driver of self-efficacy. It helps us meet our goals. And if we don't have hope, we're not going to ever develop resilience and motivation without it. How can leaders, because I think leaders are the most important piece of this puzzle, like how do leaders create everyday rituals of hope that would reinforce it in their teams, especially when they're facing burnout and all of these negative feelings and stress and they're just like over it completely? What's your take on that?
Hope, it's so interesting because it feels very nebulous. A lot of businesses and corporations have said hope is not a strategy. We've heard that a lot. And, I had the privilege of interviewing John Clifton, who's the CEO of Gallup. And just recently, only a couple of days ago, they said that the leadership skill most necessary to have future success is hope. And that employees need a sense of hopefulness because right now we are in this state of hopelessness. We see younger folks just feeling like I'm going to put off family planning. I don't want to bring children into this world. It isn't just like financial stress, which is also creating hopelessness, but it's like, no, I can't actually bring children into a society that makes me feel like is not going to take care of them. And if you have a workforce that feels like, first, I don't feel hope in society, but second, I don't feel hope in my organization, how are they going to be loyal? How are they going to have, a mission-driven attitude when mission is really about future-focused energy and putting all of your effort into something that's going to be a product of your work today, And so if we're in survival mode, it makes us feel disengaged and we feel detached, which Gallup also said we're in the era of the great detachment. And hope is, according to a lot of the people that I researched, is the only strategy. I was able to talk to senior officials, senior leaders in the military, and they said the exact same thing. Hope is the only strategy for them because, you're trying to tell people to put their lives on the line, and if they feel like that's hopeless, if they don't actually see that's going to happen, that is not going to work. You're not going to get people to be motivated. And so that's an extreme example, but it works the same inside of every organization. And hope is actually one of the easiest skills to build. It's easier than empathy building. It's easier than just optimism in general. To build hope is about three things. And this is based on evidence by Snyder's hope theory. And that's having a goal, having pathways to that goal. So you spend time as a team actually coming up with a plan A, a plan B, a plan Z, so if plan A doesn't work, well, you've got plan B to fall back on. And then getting agency and autonomy to accomplish goals without someone micromanaging you to get there. Google does an excellent job of that, really, like in that co-creation. Goals aren't too hard that they can't achieve, too easy so they feel like, what's the point? And it's movable. So if like something happens with the organization, it's not like that project just ends and it's abandoned. You've got other ways to still hit goals. And it's about celebrating every single week, like celebrating the small goals and not the big, huge, giant wins. And if we can do that, again, 20 minutes a week of just focusing on goal setting for the week and making sure that we're actually moving towards our 1 month or our 1 year or 5 year goals, it's unbelievably transformational. And that's really what we need for people, especially now with AI and people feeling like there's a sense of real AI anxiety around, workers' predictions of their role in the future.
Oh, I'm going to get into that. I got a couple questions about AI that I want to talk about. But you talk about purpose too. Without purpose, you said that work can feel monotonous and disconnected. How can we operationalize purpose in our organizations so that way people feel connected to what they're doing, especially as you get further along in contributor level roles? They feel more and more disconnected if their leaders aren't showing them how their work is impacting the greater goals, the greater purpose and what we're doing. So how do we make our employees feel like their work is not mundane, is part of something bigger?
It's really fascinating when you get into some of the research around purpose. And I spoke to Adam Grant, who's a well-known psychologist. I'm sure most listeners would know who he is, but he's been doing a lot of research on purpose. And he and I are really aligned on this myth that everyone's super attached, in an organization to the big mission statement. And when you look at the purpose gap, a lot of senior executives feel really connected to the mission statement. Most people don't really care. They really couldn't care less about the mission statement. They want to feel like the mundane and tedious tasks that a lot of people have to do every day, even in the best jobs, you have boring things you have to do. They want to feel like that they matter, like that there's a sense of mattering to what they do. And that means connecting what your own values are to that. Are you a people person? Okay, well then make sure that your, work is attached to with whom. So what Adam, I love, says is like, we keep focusing on like where, but work can be better if we think about the other W's, like with whom and what are we doing and why are we doing and, and how are we doing it? So people really care about being personable and having time with other people, make sure that their work has some sort of social connection to it. If someone really likes to be a really great parent and they feel real pride in like getting their kid into a really good school, making sure managers know that and figure out ways to offer support or programming or whatever that is, financial well-being, those benefits that will help that person who cares about that thing. And so it becomes more bespoke, and the direct manager is really involved in that, aligning purpose. And then finding like so many organizations, and I love what Microsoft does. It has this space for you to connect in from across the organization. If you care about people with disabilities, there's a place for you to come and ideate and chat and look at the products that they've built for people with disabilities. And, if you care about climate change, there's ERGs and there's places where you can connect with like-minded people about solving for issues around climate change. Like, that's really how you get people to like forget that they're doing boring things and feel like there's a joy in going to work. And then that kind of falls away. And it's also about storytelling. Like, what are you doing to tell your people how the thing that they do every day actually impacts people in a positive way? And we don't do any storytelling like that, where it's like, yeah, you might be on the line. Well, what if you're building mobility for someone because you're building wheelchairs, or, like giving people this understanding that they're not just part of, they're not a cog in the machine. They are actually contributing. And I think when you see that play out, it's like a game changer.
And I think like with the purpose, it's so connected to your next idea as community too. It's like without purpose, we probably don't have community. And then we're having this like loneliness epidemic at work. I mean, I feel it at times too with just, a lot of organizations went completely distributed workforces, and it's like disconnected us in a lot of ways. It's completely frayed from where it was before. I mean, how as leaders and HR people like who are trying to rebuild this community, this real camaraderie without like forced happy hours and other things that are just like, it does feel forced, for lack of a better word. But like, what strategies have you seen that work really well to build that community?
Forced fun is definitely a term that, is problematic, because I wrote about that in the burnout epidemic, that it fails. And then even just like, yeah, you don't want to be well washing and making it seem like you really care about people. And it's just like, it's inauthentic, and authenticity really matters. And so it's about, bringing back rituals in a way that feels like there's meaning and connection with them. And I always keep saying, like, talk to people about what they care about. There's a few tactics we can do to create that. And I think I've mentioned this, but like, culture can be changed in 20 minutes or less. It really is a 20-minute or less focus. It's incremental. So you build on that, but you start just with 20 minutes. And, one of the interventions that I mentioned that I've actually tested, and it's really been great for cohesion and team building, is this 20-minute meeting every week where it's non-work related check-in, where you just say, what lit you up? What stressed you out? What can we do for each other to make next week easier? So you find out what people really care about. That builds into purpose too, and motivation. Like, what lit you up? You can find out so many things about what people care about in those conversations, especially if they're happening weekly. What stressed you out? You're preventing burnout. You're listening for language like always and never, which really means people feel like it's a language of permanence and they're stuck. A lot of I statements, people saying that they can't sleep or they're stressed out from not sleeping, or workload. They mention workload, those kinds of things. Even if you hear like someone's had a sick kid at home and they need a little bit more leeway to get work done, maybe it's changing their goals for that week. All of that, so simple. And then what can we do for each other to make next week easier? It builds hope because it's quick wins. It's shared. So you've got this community you're working on problems together, and you feel that grow over time, and people become more vulnerable as it's consistent and frequent. Things like data showed from Cornell, this great research showed having 20-minute lunches with one of your coworkers once a week completely shifted morale. I mean, it was incredible what happened. People made less mistakes. Like, it was even just like their work improved. They were more likely to stay. Job satisfaction was higher. 20 minutes of just having lunch once a week with one another. Another one is spreading positive gossip. So talking behind each other's back in a really nice way. The research found that people that onboard feel they're so much quicker to feel psychological safety in an environment where they perceive, it doesn't have to be real, it's perceived that people say nice things about each other behind their back. Our brains actually perceive that other people are talking nicely about us. We just assume that. And that assumption actually makes us more risk taker. We become more risk taking. We are more innovative. I mean, all of these things are like even spreading positive gossip, saying a nice thing behind someone's back is literally a minute, you know? It's these things that like, and the book is really, I try to jam the book with these things that are just like 20 minutes. You can do this, and you can start with just this one tactic that will not increase your workload, will not like, it's not force fun. It's just like a writing of this negativity ship that we're on right now, and spinning it in the other direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talk about negativity. You mentioned earlier AI anxiety, and the fear is beyond AI. It's just the world's moving really fast with technology, and it's disrupting our work in good ways and a lot of bad ways. You noted in the book the World Economic Forum's Pulse of Change Index in 2024. It ranked, I think, 6 different things. I don't think technology has been at the top ever that I can remember. Technology is now number 1 in 2024. Largely due to generative AI and just the advances. So how, as leaders, as HR people, how do we take care and compassion for our employees' concerns with this new reality of adopting to new technologies? Because what I hear, and I'm sure you do too, Jen, is that AI is not going to replace your job. It's somebody using AI is going to replace your job or take your job because they are adapting quicker to these new technologies to do more and better, greater things. But I can't help shake the anxiety that a lot of people feel about the future. And how do we, as leaders, be compassionate around that?
I think that it's a swirl of a whole bunch of things, that not only is it just so quick that people feel like they can't wrap their minds around it, there's still a lot of people that feel like AI, and we hear that in the news, that it's a mass extinction event. Like people are, then this is the founder of AI going on a media tour saying this is a mass extinction event. I mean, no wonder people feel a sense of terror, abject terror around that statement. And 300 million jobs are being taken. So there's just a lot of very big statements being made. And I keep saying these are predictions. We don't really know anything. There's a lot of leaders meeting right now to figure out what that's going to look like, what the constraints are going to be on AI. But I want to remind everyone, if AI can do everyone's job, as Musk says, like AI is going to eventually do everyone's job, what is going to happen for governments with all of these people that are unemployed? I mean, there's no desire really from an economic, if you're, true economic thinker, that is just unsustainable to have a whole bunch of people that the government now has to take care of.
We were talking about the movie WALL-E. Like, we don't want it to look like that, do we?
Right. Like, and I mentioned that in the book, actually. I love that you said WALL-E, because it's like, yeah, is that what we want? No, that's what no one wants. And work is a real fuel for our happiness. When you look at longevity and lifespan, people who say that they feel connected to the work that they do, a sense of accomplishment, it actually is really good for them. So that is a thing that I think more leaders need to say, like, this is not the plan, is to make everyone unemployed. That's just it, like, that feels very irrational. And so let's talk rationally about what it looks like. And, empathy in leadership is really important, but I say, let's use compassion, because it's taking that listening and putting it into action. So, you're making sure that you're getting a lot of data from people. And again, direct managers can play a lot of role. It doesn't need to play a big role in this. They don't need big looking back surveys on engagement. It really is just providing a way for people to anonymously on the team really talk about their skills or what they're interested in, creating a curious culture. So getting people to come in and experiment with AI so that they realize, that it's so ubiquitous in our lives that they don't even realize how ubiquitous it is. And also just that they can be a powerful tool to support our work and have more conversations. Make sure as leaders, we deliver on the promise of AI. So there's 2 things that I feel like that promise of AI is not delivering on right now. One of them is that it's supposed to take the mundane and boring tasks out, and then we get to do creative, cool things with it. Instead, what's happening is it's just removing the mundane and boring, and then skills are being elevated. Like, you went from data entry and you should be actually, or data management, it should be like, now I'm delivering insights. That's not happening. And so that's the promise. Also, AI is supposed to save time. So if someone saves time and we measure productivity on hours and not goals, well, then people are just going to keep working. So now they're doubling and tripling their workload with AI just taking over some of those tasks. We need to say, hey, you know what? You were really efficient using AI. Here's time back. Like there, you don't need to burn out. And so those are the things we need to be doing. And as leaders and managers, we can really do that. And we shouldn't be taking advantage of the efficiencies that AI delivers if the whole point was for it to be time saving.
Yeah, that's well said. So for years, I've as people are talking about total rewards, flexibility always came up in that conversation of like, this is a nice perk and it's part of your total rewards. You made a bold statement in here. You're saying that flexibility has become a right. It's not a perk. It's a right. And so for a lot of leaders, I'm sure that's going to sting a little bit to think like, well, how do I give people the freedom and flexibility in their work, but also hold them accountable? What's your answer to that if now flexibility is a right?
Well, I think going back to that statement of flexibility, not just being where, because 60% of the workforce is not remote enabled. And we just are so focused on, remote, in person, hybrid. Like those three statements are totally connected to flexibility now. And flexibility should be, how do we maybe, scatter hours, for example. There was a great study that was done on these nurses, and they struggled to get care in the morning, but it was easier for them to get care in the evening. So they staggered their shifts and were allowed to do that so that at least 4 out of the 5 shifts they could work, come in after their kids went to school. I mean, these are things we can do if we're just a little bit agile with the formal policies that we have. So it can mean that. It can mean communicating with other people. It used to be that in the warehouse, it was not safe to talk to your coworker because it could lead to injury. Whereas a whole bunch of research has now come out to say that if you have a partner and you have someone that you really like working with, you're looking out for each other. So it actually improves safety. So again, these old framework policies that a lot of organizations sadly are still holding on to, that can mean flexibility, like getting more choice in your shifts, getting more choice, especially those in construction, for example. One of the biggest problems was like they didn't know when they'd be working, and then they'd go off project and they'd have months where they were underemployed. Like making sure that doesn't happen is a way to create flexibility for workers. And then in the office too, like this return to office, these mandates are just not good strategies for retaining talent, and you just lose your best and you have a whole group of people who are detached and disengaged. And when we think about flexibility, we have to look at it as freedom. And we had freedom given and now freedom taken away. And when that happens, our subconscious response is resistance. And because we would, it's so neurally baked into us that if someone takes our freedom away, we'll do anything for it. We'll die for our freedom. So this idea that it's just about laziness and people wanting to work in their pajamas, the data has shown that that's not accurate. You're more productive actually remote than you are in the office. And this idea of cohesion actually goes away when you have a mandate. So that's not true. But also that people are subconsciously feeling like you've clawed back their freedom. And so when you do create a strategy to get people back in the office, it has to be more around trust. It's not a push strategy, it's a pull strategy. Follow Atlassian, who has 91% occupancy in their offices, and they're a fully distributed work model and have no mandates. If you want 91% occupancy, they're an example of not doing it through a mandate. And they have probably had the best banner year from a business outcome and growth, moment that they've seen ever in the last few years. So I think that we need to get data right. And we also need to accept that it's about a freedom conversation now and not just about a perk, that flexibility.
Yeah. I mean, I'm aligned with everything that you're saying too. And the freedom's a big one too. Like if you take away the freedom of your people, they're going to leave, no doubt, because you take away that right that they have, they're going to walk. And then as an employer, you're kind of screwed. You need people to to work.
You you do, and we lose our best talent too. And we're seeing the thinnest pipeline for executive women right now. We're talking about wanting to retain this incredibly, important part of our workforce. They increase collective intelligence whenever they're on teams. Anita Williams-Woolley, I talk about that in the book too. I mean, we need these diverse teams, and gender on those teams really important. And we're losing women. Women are going full out. You don't see them quite quitting. And what the data we see is that they go full out and then you don't know it and they're just gone. And we're seeing for the first time female CEOs globally going down. And it was already nominal. Like it was already only 12%, 11.5%. Now it's down to 10.5%. So I think we have to do better than just that simple suck it up, everyone be back in the office. This is what we pay you for. It's transactional. We've moved from transactional to a social contract at work as soon as we invented the car phone. As soon as you could leave your work and jump into your car and take a meeting outside work, that relationship with work has changed. So people need to get on board.
Wow, that's very insightful. So here's a biggie. You said that DEI efforts, they're not working as intended. And I see that too. You said we need to tackle things upstream, kind of like the whole burnout conversation. We need to tackle things upstream before it becomes a problem or it's ineffective. What would be your first move? If you're an HR person or a leader and you're trying to make impact, what would be your first move to tackle the whole DEI belonging conversation?
Even DEI is exclusive even in its terminology. Like I say, we should have DEIA in there for accessibility. We don't even have that. Like I think we have tried to solve a problem that is so institutional. It's millennia old. I mean, it cannot just be solved with programming that's downstream. We can't just call people out and other them and then feel like everyone's just going to come in line somehow by making them feel ashamed of a behavior that they don't even realize that they're doing. And so I think I keep saying, like, let's stop having in groups and out groups. People want to have optimal distinctiveness, which is fitting in and standing out all at the same time, but not it being based on demographic data, like my color of my skin or what gender I am or my belief system, my religion. Like it should just be really good ideas. I suggest this strategy that Bill Gates used, and he does like just kind of like what we learned from someone who solved a problem this week. And every week he kind of, as the senior leader, just talks about a random person who solved a cool problem. We've tested that to see, okay, what if we had that person come on and talk about the problem that's solved? And it should be, as a senior executive CEO, that they're just choosing a diverse group of people to celebrate what problems they've solved, so it isn't tied to a demographic. Like for me, I received the International Female Entrepreneur of the Year award.
Wow.
Why did it have to be? Thank you for that. That wasn't the point, but I wish it had just been the International Entrepreneur of the Year award. Like, why does it have to be that it's female? I'm sort of in a different category, because I couldn't compete with other entrepreneurs, but there I am in the female category. And I do think that, it's wonderful, these things, because we've had to really push to even get conversations like these. But when you continue to see just such slow incremental movement, it's obviously not really doing what it's intended to do, which is create this sense of everyone being part of belonging. And so I've been saying, change the narrative, remove the ageist conversations that we're having right now. Like, stop saying that boomers can't Google and, millennials would just be able to afford homes if they stop buying avocado toast,
drinking Starbucks and avocado toast. Yeah.
Things like that that language is pervasive, and we have a lot of ways that we speak and communicate. One of the things that I thought was really interesting in the research that I did, there was this one researcher, Brandy Avens, and she looked at questions that male and female VCs ask to different entrepreneurs. And she found that both male and females will ask questions of men entrepreneurs of what their goals are, kind of the future forward of the organization, what the big plans are. But for every female startup founder, they would ask for her to defend the current state. And it's interesting that we think like there's a need to defend an idea as a female, where we just have expectations of our male counterparts to be able to deliver on something. And so again, just managers tweaking that way of asking questions, again, like 5 minutes, learning this and then applying it, you really notice how baked in our bias is. And we can make those changes without calling someone out to say, oh, you're biased or you're biased. It's like, no, let's just change the language as a community and call out people for being cool and awesome and great without underlining what their demographic background is.
Jen, we didn't cover nearly everything in your book that I wanted to cover. It's so jam-packed with a lot of great ideas, but if you could just sum it up for listeners right now to say, like, building the culture that everybody wants, that we want as people, what's the main takeaway that you want people to leave when they read this book or listen to this conversation?
I want people to feel like it's possible, that there's a sense of hopefulness right now, that it isn't these huge value changes. We don't have to laminate a new big card in our lunchrooms, or we don't need to change like our whole mission. It's about really just learning a few tactics and applying them and measuring them. Like as a manager, I can say, how are you guys feeling? Or what's going on? How is the tone? Like, do you feel satisfied? Do you feel like things are going to get better or worse? Simple ways of asking questions, and then experimenting a little with something that doesn't take much time, and then asking again in a month so that you can start to prove out your hypothesis. And then you can bring that to senior leaders to say, hey, I've done this super simple thing. I'm finding it's really helping to increase morale. Maybe we could start to move it around other parts of the organization and see how that goes. And leaders can be advocates, and employees can feel like there is a sense of hopefulness in a time where there's a lot of uncertainty and anxiety. Maybe we'll all feel a little bit happier at work, which has been my goal for a long time.
Jen, your book is awesome. It's called Why Are We Here? Creating a Work Culture Everyone Wants. I want that. I hope all the listeners want that too. And there's so many good ideas in this book, so I hope people will go pick it up. Where can people connect with you or learn more about your work, buy the book, and anything like that?
It's really, everything's on the website. There's a lot of, blogs and, resources there. It's jennifer-moss.com. Pretty easy.
My guest today has been Jennifer Moss, the author of Why Are We Here? Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much, Brandon. It's been such a pleasure.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in for today's episode of Transform Your Workplace. The content on this show is strictly for general information and educational purposes only, so that you can go transform your workplace in a positive way. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on the show are the guest's own and don't represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of either Xenium HR, the sponsor of the show, or me, the host, Brandon Laws. Additionally, Xenium HR or myself, Brandon Laws, doesn't endorse any guest, their business, or any organization they represent, so discretion is advised. We encourage you to work with a trusted advisor to find a custom approach that fits your organization's needs. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode.